All right. Uh, guess it's 11 o'clock. We'll get it going here. I want to welcome everyone to Novedge's The Best of the Best webinar series, an exploration into everything 3D. Today, we're going to be going through Light Plot Deconstructed with Gregg Hillmar, which is really exciting for us, and I'm sure as well as for you. So again, thanks for joining. I know that it's only morning here in San Francisco, but it might be afternoon or evening wherever you're logging in from. I just want to give a little background first on Gregg, and then I'll kind of talk about how the webinar is going to work. Gregg is a recognized and published consultant in Vectorworks. He's been asked to demonstrate Vectorworks by Nemetschek themselves at industry conventions like LDI, USITT, and SETC. He's also worked as a Vectorworks trainer and consultant for private corporations, and he's done public training seminars sponsored by theatrical organizations and educational institutions. He's done spotlight training sessions for NNA's own sales and tech support teams, including taking them to theaters and showing them kind of firsthand how everything works. So bottom line is Gregg's the man with the plan. So we're really lucky to have him going through Light Plot Deconstructed for 2011. Basically how the webinar is going to work is Gregg's going to speak for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to open it back up towards the end for like a Q&A session. Everyone's going to remain muted for the duration for the duration of the webinar, but if you have a question, feel free to just shoot it in the question box, and Gregg or I will get to it towards the end of the presentation. If you're wondering, this is going to be recorded, and I know because sometimes we get called away from our desk or things like that happen, or if someone comes in late. So I'll give you a little bit more information on where you can view this at your leisure after the webinar's completed. So with that, let's turn it over to Gregg, and Gregg's going to take us through Light Plot Deconstructed.
Hello.
All right, you're on, Gregg. Let me just change you over here real quick. You're live. We can hear you good, and you are now presenting.
Show my screen.
Yep, there you are.
That should do it. Good, because all I see is my screen. I don't see your screen. So yeah, hi. I'm Gregg Hillmar. As Frank mentioned, I'm a freelance lighting and scenic designer working out of Richmond, Virginia, and have been using Vectorworks for 15 years or so, I think. I think the last hand-drafted plot that's still somewhere in my portfolio was dated back about 95 or 96. So was using Minicad to start with, and then of course that developed into Vectorworks over the years, and have been doing training sessions and so forth, as Frank mentioned. Which all then morphed into Light Plot Deconstructed, the book, which is published and available from Nemetschek. Second edition is which primarily deals with Vectorworks 2010, is readily available. I understand there's still a few copies of the first edition kicking around, which was based on Vectorworks 2009. And the next edition is due any day now, so I'm told. So we'll see when that actually happens. So, but it's all based on basically this demonstration. So we're going to sort of dive right in and see what we can do here. So what we're going to end up with. Or the whole purpose, from my point of view, of this demonstration is that we are going to end up with, at the end of the day, the plot printed, the two-dimensional representation of where all the lights are hung and so forth and so on. We are not going to delve into any of the three-dimensional modeling or three-dimensional, lighting for models or that kind of thing, or rendering. The output is just, as we see on the screen here, just geared towards the two-dimensional plot that we actually use in the theater then to create the magic that we do with the actors and so forth. So I will mention this is actually a real plot, was actually in use, and everything that we'll talk about today, is sort of standard practice in creating that. So we're going to start with going back in time to the theater only. And since we're have a limited time here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about how I set up, for example, my workspace in Vectorworks and so forth. Suffice to say that it is completely customizable. You might notice, for example, that I've got a few of my own menus and so forth up here on the menu bar that are not part of the standard Spotlight or Vectorworks setup. But what you actually just saw me do here was to use a saved view, and I actually work with these pretty extensively to go, as in this case, to the theater only. And what the saved views will do is actually give us a particular saved snapshot, if you will, of the two major organizational sort of situations in Vectorworks Spotlight. The first one of which are layers. Now, back in ye old days, the production manager would send us a blue line that would look much like what's on the screen here. And we would tape that down to our drafting board, then slap a piece of vellum on top and start drawing on top of that as we work through the process. And in a complicated sort of situation, we might end up with 2 or 3 different layers or more of vellum on the drawing board as we're drafting and working through what we're actually doing. At the end of the day, at the end of the process, we'd slap a clean sheet of vellum down on top of that and then trace up to that top layer, top sheet of vellum, everything that we want to keep, and it's that top sheet of vellum that we grab off the board and run over to the blue line machine and feed through the blue line machine. In terms of drafting, two-dimensional drafting like we're doing here, I use layers basically pretty much synonymously with those sheets of vellum. So Vectorworks now works with 2 different types of layers. The design layers are the main layers that we're actually drawing on. And you can see here actually a series of different layers. We'll touch on most of them as we're going through the demonstration today. So I do all of the drawing actually on particular layers, pretty much synonymously, as I said, with sheets of vellum. And then I use the second type of layer that Vectorworks Spotlight provides us with, which are known as sheet layers, as that top layer that I'm going to copy things up to that I want to then run off and print. So my saved view here, for example, changed the layer setup. So you can see here right now the theater layer is the active layer. We're looking at the theater layer and the flies layer. All the rest of these layers, just like sheets of vellum, can be removed from our drawing board. They've been stuck over on the side, and we can slide them back in and put them back onto the table as we need to. And our saved view will remember those. The other organizational thing that I use are the classes, and for the most part, I use my classes to control graphic attributes. So, for example, if I were to just draw a simple rectangle, let's try that again. If I were to draw a simple rectangle, thank you, we can give that different line weights, different fields, et cetera, so forth. I tend to do those by class, so that, for example, if I wanted this to be a platform in a plan view, I might want that to be a medium weight line. So I've got a class set up called draft medium that changes the line weight and changes the fill and so forth, controls all of those things for any object that's drawn in that class. And our saved view will also actually change our class, make classes visible or not visible. Very nice thing about classes is they work across all layers. So if I make a class visible or invisible, it changes all objects in that class across all layers. So so let's see. We'll go back to our theater only here to get a back to a bird's eye view. I will point out actually that my production manager in this particular show sent this drawing to me as a DWG. So Vectorworks can import and export, I'll point out, in DWG or DXF with relative ease, so that we can bring in and work with objects that come from our less fortunate, perhaps, friends using other programs. We can also actually import PDF files as well, and if they contain vector information, i.e. Things drawn with lines and so forth, Vectorworks will snap to those as it does to normal vector information. So we can import information that comes in that way as well. I actually still work with a scenic designer who draws by hand, and I can actually import his drawings. What I'll usually do is either scan them or take a picture of them, and then import them. Let's see if I can find where I stashed that. Here's one real quickly. And we can import that right into the drawing here as well. Another thing to mention actually is that with any of these things, I can actually drag and drop them in the drawing. I don't have to use the import command to do that. Now you might actually notice, if we zoom in on this, that this is actually not quite the right scale, not the same scale as the theater. One thing to remember about Vectorworks layers is that they do work in scale. Frankly, the scale won't matter until we go to print, but maybe because of the way that I learned to draw by hand first or whatever, I tend to like to draw in half-inch scale. So all of my layers initially are set up usually in half-inch scale. This drawing obviously is not in the same scale. This drawing actually was done for this space, different production. Luckily, that's a really easy thing to fix. We can use the scale object command, and I'm going to make this symmetrical by distance and tell it that I remember this site from here to here was 37 feet, and it will scale that object right up to the right size for this particular space. So we have a lot of ways then that we can import and use other people's information coming into Vectorworks to be able to use. Let's get rid of that, and we're going to pop down to a different layer here. This particular show actually was a ref plot for several performances, so it was drawn as a rather generic sort of thing. At this point, we can really start thinking about how we're going to light this space just as a wide open focus. And so I might think about starting to light this. I'm going to grab the rectangle tool actually and draw a rectangle down here. Now, one of the nice things about Vectorworks is that as I'm drawing, you can see in the sort of heads-up display down there the size of the object that I'm actually drawing. I can also tab into those, and I might say that we want this to be 8 foot, and we're coming down screen, so that would be a negative 8 foot. Hit return, and that's going to constrain that rectangle to be that particular size. So this rectangle now is an 8 foot by 8 foot rectangle. I'm going to open up the object information palette. We can see over here its class is listed, its layer is listed. Vectorworks now actually deals with two-dimensional objects in two different ways. They can either be a screen plane object in that the two-dimensional object is always parallel to the screen, or they can be a layer plane object in that the two-dimensional object is parallel to the particular layer. Now, in two-dimensional mode, that doesn't make very much difference, but if I switch to a three-dimensional view, actually, let me put them all into that view. You can see here actually that we're looking at three different layers here actually. The scenery layer has some three-dimensional curtains on them. And it also now has this two-dimensional rectangle that we just drew. It is a layer plane object, so it's laying down on the floor, if you will. The theater itself is a two-dimensional drawing, again, imported from a DWG. But it is now in the space. We can look at it in the three-dimensional space as if it was laying down on the floor. And in fact, from that, if we wanted to, we could construct pretty easily a three-dimensional representation of the space. So were my rectangle here to actually still be a screen plane object, and I can just change that in the object information palette, and you can see that it's changed back to an object that's parallel now to the screen. I brought my whole screen back to my two-dimensional top plan view. Now, I made this 8-foot by 8-foot because I happen to remember actually that this theater had a 40-foot wide proscenium. If I'm going to light chunks of space in this proscenium, I always like odd numbers of areas. So an 8-foot by 8-foot area, first off, is about as large a chunk of space as you actually are going to want to light in a theater. And that gives me actually an odd number of areas across. So I know I'll always have a center stage area and go from there. So I'm going to use that 8-foot by 8-foot space as my designation of an area to light. Now we all know that light doesn't fall into nice little squares, unless of course we want it to. But generally speaking, it's not a nice little square. And of course, it is in reality a three-dimensional space. But again, going back to the hand drafting days, designating areas as rectangles or squares in this case it works quite well. Now, one of the new features actually in Vectorworks Spotlight is we're going to actually come over here, grab the focus point tool, and one of the new features is we can now actually designate the graphic and the shape that goes with that focus point object that we're going to create. And Vectorworks ships with several already made for you, as you can see here, actually, I've made a couple of my own, so I can designate my own two and or three-dimensional object and turn them into a focus point shape. We're going to choose the 8-foot square in this case. We're going to show the focus point name. And I'm going to, let me actually pop this rectangle a little closer to where it really wants to be using the nudge command. Sorry, using a key command that you can't see. Grab my focus point tool again. And using the cursor snaps and keys, I'm going to click once to place that focus point. We are going to name this focus point A, so I'll leave that the same. You notice it's asking for a focus point height. Vectorworks does work, as we've seen, in 2- and 3-dimensional space. And it's in that 3-dimensional space that a lot of the power of Spotlight comes to work. So it's asking us how high is that focus point. Now, 5 foot is a nice generic sort of top of the shoulder kind of height, which will work well for many situations. I'm going to leave that default right there for now. If, however, my actors were on top of a 2-foot tall platform, I might want to change that from 5 foot to 7 foot. As I said, we're going to just accept that as it is. Click OK, and you can see here now that Vectorworks has placed, let's get rid of our initial rectangle, has placed a focus point designator right there where I placed it. We can change the size of the text and so forth and so on through your normal standard text control sort of things. So we get to determine then, exactly what that focus point actually gets to be. So, and then through the magic of a saved view, we can pop over and find actually a whole set of areas for the space already filled in. I will mention actually that with my area selected, I could use the duplicate array command here and be able to create that grid with one simple move. One of the new things that's also very nice is using the duplicate array tool. Vectorworks will rename the focus point objects for us as it creates that duplicate array. So makes turning this grid out a very simple and easy sort of thing. So there are areas that we're going to light, the chunks of space that we're going to light. So let's see, our next step actually is going to be, we can't start placing instrumentation yet because we need to know where to hang the lights, right? So we're going to create some lighting positions. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool again. And I will admit to cheating. I placed a little locus down here in the corner where I know that the first front of house position starts. So I'm going to click to start my drawing the first front of house position. I get my heads up display again. I'm going to tab into that. I remember that this position was 44 feet 9 inches. And I'm going to make it delta Y 2 inches. And hit return. It's now constrained. A click will actually place that rectangle. I'm going to change its class to my draft medium class, so it's a medium weight line. Let's zoom in a half a step here. And I'm actually, because Vectorworks works in both the two-dimensional and the three-dimensional space, for this lighting position we have to create a three-dimensional component of it as well. So I'm going to use the duplicate command, which in my Vectorworks preferences I have the duplicate set up so it duplicates in place. There are actually two rectangles now stacked one on top of the other. The duplicate is selected. I'm going to extrude it to create the three-dimensional part of this. So I'm going to extrude that by 2 inches. Tell this OK. And what we now have is a 2 inch by 2 inch by 44 foot 9 inch cube, basically, three-dimensional object sitting on top of my two-dimensional rectangle. And yes, we all know that actually most of the time we're hanging lights on a piece of pipe, not a piece of square stock. But frankly, in the you won't be able to notice that unless you're actually in the three-dimensional world and zoom in real close. So at least in my opinion, it doesn't make much difference that we're looking at a cube there. And in fact, in our moving around and rendering process, doing the computations to get the round piece of pipe eats up a whole lot of unnecessary, at least in my opinion, unnecessary processing time. So cube works just fine, again, thinking about the two-dimensional output that we're trying to get. So I'm now going to hold down on my Macintosh the Option key, drag across both of those objects. I can look at my object information palette, and I've got both of those selected. Tell that OK. I'm going to group these to turn them into one object, and then go to the Spotlight commands. Now, again, in Vectorworks 2011, one of the very nice things that they've done is moved all of the Spotlight-related commands into a single menu, which in earlier versions of Vectorworks I used to do as one of the very first things I did when I was customizing my workspace was moved all of those into its own menu. Here they all are. I'm going to choose the conversion, convert to light position. We're going to name this first front of house. Tell that OK. And we can now see over here in the object information palette that this is now a light position object. We can see the class and the layer that it's on. Its X position, its Y position. Notice it's now showing a Z position. It is, in fact, a three-dimensional object. Or deals in three-dimensional space. So it has a position in height as well. Right now, with the Z of 0, it's sitting on the floor. Not necessarily the best place for it. So what I'm going to do is use my Save View to pop over to a section drawing. And I will mention again, this was a working document. So here in the section, we see lots of checking of angles and sightline references and so forth. I'm going to grab the tape measure tool. Line tool works just as well in this case. Come up and right at the first front of house position there. Come down until I'm in line with the stage level, and then I can read off from my heads-up display that that's 24 feet in the air. Use my return to view, return to last view command, go back to my other layer here, and now with the light position object, I can say this is going to be 24 feet in the air. Now, there are a couple other options here in the object information palette. We can choose to have this light position object keep track of a bunch of information for us. We can turn on a position summary and have it, for example, count the number of instruments that are on this position. So as we add light to it, Vectorworks Spotlight will keep a total of an inventory, running inventory of this position, and print it out for us if we so desire on the finished plot. Of course, it will not only count per position, but then as we work through the rest of the plot, it keeps track of the instrumentation that's used in the plot as a whole. There is a place actually where we could actually enter, if we're working in a theater that has an inventory, we can enter that inventory inventory in to Vectorworks, and it would tell us when we need to start talking to the rental houses about rental or whatever. At the end of the day, though, we can get a finished instrument inventory of everything that's on the plot. Likewise, as we add instruments and colors to those instruments, the physician will count the color cuts necessary for this particular position, and again for the plot as a whole. We can have it keep track of the circuits. If we put 5 lights on this particular position, Vectorworks Spotlight would tell us, okay, that means there need to be 5 circuits at this position as well. There's a twofer tool that we'll touch on briefly perhaps later given time, but suffice to say that if I twofer 2 instruments, Vectorworks Spotlight is smart enough to know that rather than 5 circuits, I now need just 4. So again, we can keep track of the number of circuits that we're using in a particular position as we move along. We can choose to have this position automatically numbered so that as we add instruments, they automatically get numbered. We can choose whether they're numbered from right to left, left to right, top to bottom, bottom to top, depending on the orientation of the instrumentation. So, and Vectorworks is smart enough to know if this is actually checked on, that if we are working on our plot, we have 5 instruments across, and we put an additional instrument between instruments number 1 and 2, it will automatically renumber, the added instrument is number 2, and renumber all the rest of the instruments on that position based on that. So in early days of the plot, I'm actually leaving that checked on. Once the plot is sort of solidified a little bit, I might check that off so that I can manually renumber instruments that I put in to indicate that they are actually added instruments. We can also choose with multi-circuit instruments like strip lights or sky spikes or so forth, whether those are numbered alphanumerically by point number or number point alpha, depending on our particular preference of how we like those multi-circuit instruments numbered. Now, all of that is handled by the light position object. So with that there, we are now actually ready to start hanging some instruments. And perhaps, let's see, perhaps we're going to light area C here. So what I would usually do actually is, if for lighting area C, I'm going to grab the line tool, and starting from area C, I'm going to pull off a line, and I'm going to hit my shift key so it's constraining, and it's constraining at 45 degrees. So maybe with a nod to Mr. McCandless, we're going to choose to put a light out here at 45 degrees. So where this line crosses that first front of house position, if I hang a light there, that's going to be at a 45-degree angle to my area C. Excuse me. So Vectorworks Spotlight shifts with hundreds of lighting equipment symbols. I'm going to open my resource browser, and if I choose to browse a document, I can go to, let's see, this is the application, which actually where I want to go is to, there we go, my personal libraries. We're using 2011 libraries. There are hundreds of symbols here that ship with Vectorworks. With Vectorworks Spotlight, there are object entertainment, and then each of these files actually represents major manufacturers' equipment with symbols already drawn and so forth. If I choose ETC, for example, it will open in the resource browser symbols of all of the ETC equipment. Now these are two-dimensional representations and three-dimensional representations of all of those equipments. But they also are not just the graphics. They include information about beam angles, about field angles, candle power, what the lamp is of the instrument, what the weight is of the instrument, color frame size, and all sorts of other things here as provided by the manufacturer of these particular instrument types. And these all come with Vectorworks Spotlight. Now, it's worth mentioning that there are actually also third-party symbols available, many of which are also 2D and 3D symbols and have the same sort of information as part of them as well. Soft symbols, for example, is one that I particularly am fond of. Soft symbols actually look much more like in the old days when we drafted with templates. The soft symbols are designed to look more like a template kind of thing. So actually in this case, though, I've already got some instruments in my original file. So back in the resource browser, go back to this particular file, go to my instruments file folder, and here you can see actually numbers of symbols that are already in this particular file. So I might, for example, grab a ETC source for 19 degree to start with. I'm going to double click it to make it the active symbol. I can see down here at the bottom of the resource browser, it is the active symbol. And you might notice actually that my tool set, my active tool has just changed to the instrument insertion tool. A really nice touch actually. In earlier versions of Vectorworks, you had to do that manually. So it's very nice now that we can click on an instrument and the instrument insertion tool becomes active. So let's close that browser there, and we're going to zoom in here a little bit. Instrument insertion tool, I'm going to position this so that I'm on. Actually, one of the things that I didn't, didn't touch on today was setting up grids and so forth. But you might notice there's an 18-inch grid set up in this horizontally, so that I know where my closest 18-inch spacing is. So I'm going to go to the closest spacing, make sure I'm sitting on top of my first front of house, and I'm going to start to place the instrument. Okay. Now you'll notice actually that I clicked once, start to place the instrument, but it hasn't actually placed the instrument now. Now back in ye old days when I learned to draft, actually I was always taught to draft lighting instruments at 90-degree increments relative to the position. So I might have an instrument that is vertically oriented like this on a horizontal position, or it might be horizontally oriented, but it's in one of the four cardinal sort of points. Other people were taught to draft so that the instrument is actually pointed at the area in which it's focused. Again, Vectorworks Spotlight is not going to make that choice for you. You get to decide how you like your plot to look. So I'm going to put mine vertically. And the second click actually places that light. We can come over here to the Object Information palette and notice that, that it has been placed. Classes, layers listed there. Notice the Z height. And notice actually that it has picked up that it's on that first front of house position. So these two objects are actually now talking to each other and sharing information. It's saying if I'm on the first front of house position, then my Z height must be 24 feet because we specified the first front of house position to be 24 feet in the air. So these things are sharing information, and you can notice here in the Object Information palette actually a bunch of other information that is tracked about each and every light. So we might, for example, fill in this purpose. This might be area C, cool. And unit number is actually going to be filled in by the position, as we mentioned. We're going to go to the color and say that this is maybe a Roscoe 65. I usually don't assign dimmers and channels until later in the process, but just for fun, we're going to say that this is dimmer 45. So my master electrician tells me, and maybe it's on channel 67. You notice actually, as I'm putting this information in, it's showing out here around the information. I'm sorry, around the instrument. This information actually is controlled or specified through the label legend manager. And we can have, as you can see here, several different label legends. We can choose which one is active. We can choose which of these fields we want to actually show around the instrument. We can choose whether they're right reading or not. So for example, the unit number, I might want to say it's always stay parallel, if you will, to the bottom of the piece of paper, no matter how the instrument rotates. On the other hand, the color, we do not want right reading, because if we put the color in front of the instrument, as I traditionally do, if I rotate the instrument, I want the color to rotate with that. We can also choose whether there's a circle or a hexagon, in this case, around those particular attributes, or if there's no container around those. We can actually draw our own containers and use those as well. And we can also choose how that is actually laid out in terms of where it is around the instrument itself. All of that controlled by the label legend manager. One nice thing is it can take some time to get the layout exactly right in the label legend. You only luckily have to do that once, because the label legends become a resource and are importable into any other document once they're actually built. So all of that, we can choose to show all of that around our instrument like that. We can not only see that information in the Object Information palette, but if we double-click on the instrument, we get a dialog box where we see much of the same other information. One thing that's nice here is that we do have a drop-down box for the focus. The purpose that we put in up here is just a text label. I want to relate this instrument to focus object C, and if we tell this OK, let me zoom out a little bit here, and actually I'm going to get rid of this line. We can now choose to draw beam, and this now says, okay, if this instrument is 24 feet in the air and at a 45-degree angle and focused at focus point C, it does the math, shows us the beam and the field of that of where that instrument actually is. And actually looking at this, we can see that a 19 degree is not actually covering this area. So I might go back to my resource browser, change that 26 degree, make that the active symbol, and come back to my object information palette and replace, and bing, it automatically updates the beam in the field and keeps the other information that we added in, but updates the instrument type and the beam in the field in that particular for that particular instrument. So these smart objects again are talking to each other and giving us information that we need to work. Another example of that actually is using a photometer tool. If I grab that and place one of these, let's zoom in on this. This is telling me that I'm getting 99 foot candles of light at this particular place from that particular light. This is, however, telling me this is at elevation 0. If you remember, we set our focus point at 5 feet. So if I change the elevation of that to 5 feet, you see it moves up into the beam of light and updates the foot candles there. Now, frankly, as a theatrical designer, do I really care that there's 180 foot candles of light at that place? Well, no, not really. Certainly, though, anybody who does any work with a camera, that information becomes very important. And actually, I use these tools and the photometer grid to lay a grid across the whole space and might check for dark spots and that sort of thing. Again, though, these objects are talking to each other, sharing information, and actually making our life easier to make decisions about types of information and so forth. So now, through the magic of a saved view, we actually can continue to do the rest of our situation like that until, voila, the plot is finished. And don't we wish it was just that easy? So, but all of these instruments have been laid in exactly the same way that we just did, and working through all of the things that we just did with that. So let's see. We can zoom in here and look at these. I see I'm running out of time, so I'm actually not going to mention. We can I'll mention we can put accessories on these instruments and lots of other things that we can do. One nice thing to be aware of actually is if we move a position, all of the instruments actually move with that. And in fact, if we even if we rotate a position, all of the instruments move with that as well. So, you know, these things are smart objects that are talking to each other and doing all sorts of things from there. So let's see. The other one thing I did want to touch on really quickly is in Vectorworks, there is a sort of built-in rudimentary paperwork sort of tracking situation. I don't use it very much because actually if I come over to Spotlight Preferences, choose Spotlight Preferences, I can click on an automatic light-right data exchange, and this will provide, as it says, an automatic exchange of data with light-right using the fields that light-right wants to know about, and allow us to use light-right to handle all of our paperwork. And so information that's entered in light-right is brought back into Vectorworks. Things that are changed in Vectorworks are updated in light-right so that all of our paperwork actually is handled easily with these two programs. So now the last piece of the situation here is actually to, once the plot is finished, to be able to print that. And the way that we're going to do that, let me zoom out here, is by creating a viewport. And what we're going to do with the viewport actually is just like laying a sheet of paper on top of the stack, we're going to choose the information that we want to copy up onto our sheet layer that we're going to print. So we get to choose here in this dialog box which layers are being seen, which classes are being seen, As I mentioned, the scale is not important until we go to choose that, what kind of views we want to see, et cetera, so forth. I'm actually going to cancel this because this first sheet that we started with, if I zoom out a step, you can see is actually a sheet layer. We can see the boundaries of the page. We can see the viewport here. And again, on the sheet layer, I can choose what scale, what layers, et cetera, so forth, and change those as needed. Just as an example, if we zoom in here, you notice when we were looking at the plot, the purpose and so forth was showing on that. When we're working on the plot, that's useful information. When we're printing the plot and sending this off to the master electrician, frankly, the purpose is just clutters up the plot. We can use paperwork to find that. So by turning off the class that particular label is in, we can say, don't copy this up to that final sheet. And we are then actually ready to print this and send it out the door. Also worth mentioning is that actually you can have more than one viewport on a sheet layer, and they can be different scales. So for example, if we needed to do a detailed drawing of this boom in a different scale, I might just go back to my initial drawing, create a second viewport just of that boom, and I can print it here on the exact same page at a different scale, so we can do detailed without redrawing any of the information. And there you have it. In 40 minutes or less, our plot is ready to go out the door. So I think with that, I'll see if we can answer some questions. And let's see, I don't know how to do this. Frank, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Let's see. Well, I can read them off for you. Brian asks, where do we enter the house inventory into Vectorworks?
Let me think about that. I think it's in the worksheet function. So you have to actually create the worksheet as if you were doing that for using that for paperwork, and there's a part of that worksheet that you enter in the inventory is what my memory says. Since I don't ever use that paperwork, I actually enter the house inventory in Lightright. So I'm not way familiar with that.
Okay. Let's see. Axel asks, it seems to me that WYSIWYG is more automated with many of the report functions from LW. Do you have experience with WYSIWYG and some pros and cons of it?
I've never used WYSIWYG except for to play with it. I would say that in terms of LW, I'm assuming is Lightright is what he's referring to. That all of the report functions and so forth in Lightright. First off, there's a bunch that come standard and are easy to use. Also, actually, in Vectorworks, instrument schedules and so forth and so on can be imported into drawings and reused. So those are relatively automated. It's also easy in Lightright to change any sort function or any of the reporting capabilities. And in Lightright, when you you can choose to print particular reports either to paper, to text file, or PDF, or whatever you want to do. So I've always been very happy with Lightright. Most of my stuff is standard theatrical sort of stuff, like what we're seeing here, that goes out the door. Most of it goes out the door these days as a PDF. So a PDF of the plot and the Lightright file and the PDF of Lightright seems to work just fine for me.
Okay.
Not being terribly familiar with WYSIWYG.
All right. Well, that was actually We only had two questions. We can hold on for a moment if any of you wanted to shoot a question into the question box. We still
Okay,
have.
I'm seeing a couple here.
Real.
I don't know if we're seeing the same ones here. There's one from Grant. Is there a 3D representation
Oh,
of
there
the
we go.
lighting? So the quick answer is yes. If we go back to our plot on our sheet layer, is my control panel on the screen? I have no idea what's.
Yeah, we can see your control panel. Yeah.
Okay, let me collapse it then. Get it out of the way here. So we're back on the design layer here, and yes, in fact, if we move to any of the three-dimensional views, let me turn on my Stay Connected button here. You can see that actually these are all three-dimensional, are seen in 3 dimensions, and in fact, if we turn on, let me make sure this particular light is area A, and let me fill that in and turn on its beam. That actually the beam and fields are actually shown in 3-dimensional space as well. So we can we can move around in the 3-dimensional space. By the way, I'm using my my number keys here. One of the real benefits of learning the 3-dimensional sort of space is where being able to move around in it with your key commands. Actually, I'd suggest that with anything. So we can see the 3-dimensional beam, instrumentation of beam, and so forth, and work that in 3 dimensions. Though again, for me, what's important actually at this particular case is in fact the 2-dimensional representation, which is why you may have noticed, for example, the booms were laying on the floor. There is actually a command within Vectorworks so that you can actually place the booms 3-dimensionally in the right place and yet still get the sort of traditional theatrical layout for the booms here. So that's a very nice sort of command that is also relatively new. Not in 2011, but so let's see. Hopefully that answers that question. What do we see here? What font are you using? Actually, my main font, which we see here, is a font called 2x4. And it's a commercially available font. I don't, if you did a search for it, and I frankly like the fact that it's has a sort of hand-drawn look to it. One of the things we didn't mention, if we go back to our viewport on our sheet layer, it is possible to change change this from wireframe to, for example, sketch, and we could actually, I don't know, print this out on a napkin or something and be like in the old days sitting in the bar designing lights. So point is that actually, that sort of hand-drawn look is something I use quite often. I wouldn't send a font out the door looking like that, but I certainly have used that sketch mode actually in doing scenic design work. When a director doesn't want to see anything that's quite so formal, if you will, using that sketch mode in the viewport actually works quite well. So the font, though, is called 2x4. Long answer to a quick question. Access page border and show legend. The page border in this case. Now, what you're talking about actually, I'm assuming is where the print edges actually are, as opposed to the border. The drawn border there is actually part of the title block. The page border information is part of your page setup, where we set up, how big the particular page is. When you're in a sheet layer, you will always see the page boundary, so you cannot check that on or off. But these borders here actually are based on the page size. If you're in a design layer, and let's pop back to our plot, which is a design layer, you can turn on and off the page boundary. Frankly, I always leave that turned off. Reason being, if you turn it on, and then we come out, you might notice that it actually defines the size of the grid. And I want the grid over my whole drawing. And since I'm not worried about printing, I'm not worried about page size when I'm working on the design layers, I usually turn off that that option so that my grid is over the whole drawing as opposed to just on that page. So what else have we got here? How do you rotate a 3D object like a lighting position in 3D space? You can actually go into, lapse that out of the way, if we go into my front look. I haven't done this in a long time, but it seems to me, I don't remember if it just, yep, won't do it that way. So rotation, that rotates it in two-dimensional space. Can actually then set a working plane, as I recall, and then be able to rotate it also in the third dimension there. So that gets a little more complicated than I want to dive into right at the moment. But it certainly is possible. Use instruments to create a rendering. The answer to that actually is I will usually not use the plot as we're looking at it here to create a rendering. I will usually very particularly create particular lights to get the look that I want in the rendering. Yes, it is absolutely possible to create a rendering using the plot. I just find it easier and faster actually to do that as a separate function. I will mention actually also there's a third-party product that allows all of the Vectorworks geometry to be exported and used to much as WYSIWYG does, for example, or that sort of thing, to visualize hues, including moving lights and moving pieces of scenery or truss and so forth. And that is ESP Vision is the name of that. Works directly with the Vectorworks data to be able to visualize that kind of thing. So something like that would be a much better choice than doing it here. Yes, you can do it, absolutely. But I usually set up renderings as a separate exercise, separate from the two-dimensional plot. Vectorworks create section command. Yes, I do. More so actually when I'm designing scenery than when I'm designing lights. Usually because much of the information I'm getting, theatrical architecture and so forth from production managers still is a lot two-dimensional instead of three-dimensional. So I find it easier actually to create my drawings from scratch or draw over the section command so that I get to choose what it looks like as opposed to what Vectorworks particularly creates. Can you show how to create a fixture? Not in the 90 seconds I think we have left. Suffice to say that actually you can create anything that you want. And so, for example, I've got some of these floor pockets, my practical symbol and so forth. You can create them as a symbol, and then use the convert to light object to, where to go? Convert to instrument command to turn that into an object that Vectorworks recognizes as as an instrument. When the viewport is created, can the scale be zoomed? Absolutely. So, and that's one of the joys of actually viewports. We go back to our sheet layer. This particular viewport. Let me again close that. All right, come on. Thank you. This particular viewport, if we looked at this, for example, and decided, well, that's too big for the page, I can change the scale as easily as, well, now it's going to be twice the size, as easily as that, though. So this is now that same drawing in half-inch scale, and, you know, because it doesn't fit on the page, I can pop it back down to quarter-inch scale. I can, as easily as that, change the scale. So, and as I mentioned, we can have more than one viewport on a page, and they can all be in different scales. So I can do a drawing easily with detailed drawings on the same viewport. So I don't have my clock on this computer. What's our time?
Yeah, we're actually a little bit past 12. So I think we got all the questions. We actually only have one more if you wanted to answer it. Well, actually, okay. Jesper just added. There's two more, but Grant wants to know: do you place objects in your lighting space and check for the shadows or lighting quality?
Yes, I do. So that's one of the things that I also didn't mention is there's a function where you can actually use use shutters. So we see in the beam and field how that actually works, and you can also turn on the color in the beam and field. And actually, if you render those, they will render with the closest representation that your computer screen can do. It changes Roscoe 69 into whatever its equivalent RGB values are. So yes, I will place objects in and turn on lights from different angles to see what things look like. Again, I usually do that before I actually start drafting the plot. So by the time I'm actually drafting, I've decided on my key. I've decided where the lights are coming from in each individual area, and I know the angles that I want, so that actually laying the plot out is more a function of drafting as opposed to conceptualizing. And that goes back to the rendering question earlier. I make those decisions actually before I start drafting.
Okay, and last question from Jesper is: do you prefer to use the VW truss or use your own in segments?
It depends actually on what's in what I'm using in the theater. If it's something that is easily creatable through the truss tool, then I will use the Vectorworks stuff. If I'm using a custom piece of truss, or quite often I use custom pieces for vertical booms, for example. I'll draw those myself and turn them into a symbol, and then be able to use them time and time again as a symbol, and in fact, then also create them as a light position object as well. So I do both. It depends.
Okay, all right, and that was the last question. Let's see. All right, hey, back on my screen. There you are. Hey,
okay.
It's Greg. Well, thanks.
It is.
Thanks a lot, Greg. We all really appreciate that. It was a brilliant presentation. I know I found it fascinating, and I know that everyone else out there did too, as you can see from all the questions. So I just want to thank everyone out in internet land for joining us for today's presentation of Novedge's The Best of the Best webinar series. Just real quick, if you're unfamiliar with Novedge, we're the leading online design superstore. Not only do we have the best prices around, but our staff is awesome, and we're only a phone call away, really knowledgeable as well. And we've kind of also done something a little bit different. There's our website if you want to take a look. We actually carry Gregg's book. If you wanted to pick it up, you can pick it up at novedge.com. But also of note is we kind of tend to want to go above and beyond as far as the CAD community is concerned. So what we've done is we've created social networking communities that are based around products. What you see on your screen right now is Vectorworking, and this whole community is just based around Vectorworks. It's free to sign up. It's really quick, really easy, and once you're a member, you get access to all kinds of up-to-date info, trends, news, releases. We have a media section where actually the recording of this webinar is going to be available for you to view anytime. The other Vectorworks related videos in this series are in the media. We also post Vectorworks tutorials, demos, other presentations. And in my personal opinion, the real key factor behind becoming a part of Vectorworking is the fact that Gregg himself is actually a member, as well as other gurus like Gregg, Jonathan Pickup, Tamsin Slatter. They're all members of Vectorworking, and so we have this community where we can really communicate, collaborate, and kind of grow as Vectorworks users. So if any of you have any questions as far as this webinar is concerned, feel free to shoot me an email. There's my email right there, frank@novedge.com. Comments, whatever, or if you just have some suggestions for a future webinar, we'd really appreciate it. In 2 weeks, we've got our next webinar in this series, and then we're going to be going through AutoCAD for Mac with Sean Hurley. So to get more info on that, just cruise on over to novedge.com/webinar series, and you can get more info and register for that. Thanks again to everyone out there. Thank you so much, Gregg. You were awesome, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right, take it easy, Gregg.